Coming up on UGTV. A special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
As long as possible because I want to save us watching the Chiefs not be able to
Delay
stop
all you
pass
want.
rush.
You delay all you want.
Yeah. All right. Good evening. I'll call the meeting to order. Thank all for being here. I'd ask the clerk to announce the meeting and please call roll.
A special session is being held on Thursday, October 17th, 2019 at 5 o'clock p.m. in the fifth floor conference room for a long-range financial plan presentation. Immediately following, the commission will reconvene to the ninth floor conference room for an executive session regarding labor. Roll call. Burrows.
Here.
Townsend. McKiernan.
Here.
Lugia.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Kane. Here. Markley.
Here.
Walters. Here. Philbrook.
Here.
Bynum.
Here.
Alvey.
Here. So tonight we have a presentation regarding the long-range financial plan. I'll turn it over to Mr. Bach to introduce staff.
Thank you, Mayor. That's exactly what we're doing. We're working on a long-range financial forecast. So as you'll see as you go through this, it's not our plan for different things because there are some things where the revenues come up in very good shape, and there's others where we forecast the revenues are dropping off, and we will change our financial plan as we go along so that we never have deficits in any area. But Ms. Financian and Ms. Johnson have gone through and with their staff and studied out in many different areas to project several years in the future and show us how we're looking. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen and let her move through this. Kathleen.
Good evening. Thank you, Doug. We are going to talk about the long-range plan. This year, it's a little different than it was last year. I presented our second long-range financial forecast last year in October. So pretty much 12 months from now. And this year's, there's two things that are different about it. First off, it isn't just the general fund. It also includes all the other governmental funds. So that would include the dedicated sales tax, the tourism tax, all of the special county levy funds, and both of the city and the county debt service funds. So, quite a bit in there, all of them. Basically, all the certified funds you see during the budget process, only excluding the stormwater and the T-Bone Stadium and the sewer fund, and the golf fund, and the EMS fund. Those are all funds that are enterprise funds, and they're not governmental, so they're not included in this, all right? The other difference is that we also decided to use data from a cash basis, because that's how we do our budgeting. So basically, it's kind of cash in, cash out. And I've often talked about the difference between CAF or modified accrual and a cash basis, and I just wanted you to know it's a little different. This is all cash basis, all right? I have with me my deputy, Debbie Johnsher, who's going to be talking about the specific funds. But first off, I want to start off by just giving you a little bit of an agenda. First off, we're going to take a look real briefly on the economic outlook. Then Debbie's going to walk you through all the cash balance baseline forecasts of the various funds. Here they all are. And baseline means that basically this is what we're predicting is going to happen, but it's the baseline. So we'll be looking at different scenarios that would change the baseline up or down, and that's the third category, different scenarios and your discussion. It's going to be a little more interactive than in the past. So get ready. This is the first screen where I'm talking about the economic outlook. I just wanted to point out that, even though this is a forecast, as the famous John Kenneth Galbraith said, the only function of economic forecasting is to make astrology look respectable. So just keep in mind that the staff is not attempting to predict what happens in the future, but rather to plan for the future, given the known facts we have today, all right? And we do have some facts that inform us about what might happen in the future. The second point I wanted to point out before we get into this is that you have to keep in mind revenue diversification is different amongst the various governmental funds. And what I mean by that is that there are some funds that are more reliant on sales tax and less so on property tax. And yet there are other funds that are the opposite of that. And so if one of the funds, has a dramatic turn for the worst, those funds that are reliant on that one are going to be more negatively impacted than the others. So even though, for example, property tax growth looks pretty moderate or strong, but sales tax growth looks weak, you would think maybe those would balance with each other, but that would only be the case if a fund were getting 50-50 of each of those revenue sources. So just keep that in mind as you see the rest coming up. So, yeah, all right. So first off, I have 2 slides that talk about the economy, that's all. And in the report that we presented here tonight, it's on the agenda, uploaded on the website, but under the agenda packet. But once we have this presentation, we'll be adding it to the finance department's finance documents or finance report section, so you can have access to it. All right, but the economic outlook has about 8 or 9 pages of discussion on our recent indicators. I'm just going to talk about these 2 slides. And what I noticed when reviewing all the economic indicators, I noticed that the economy is pretty mixed. There's some good indicators, and then there's some indicators that are not so good. So the first off is that population is up. We're forecasting that every year it'll increase about 1.7%, so less than 1%, but still good growth. Unemployment has declined. It's at 4.8% in 2018. Median household income has been up. It's now at $47,000 for the county as of 2018, as well as average wages are also up in 18. And the Zillow home prices demonstrate that the prices of homes have increased by 13% as of August of 2018 compared with August of 2017. But on the downside, we've noticed that inflation in the region has ticked up by 0.2% in 2018. that jobs went down last year. They didn't go up. They went down ever so slightly, about 400 or 500 jobs, and that equates to 0.5% for a total of 90,465. Retail, food sales, and accommodations or hotel retail prices or receipts those categories have gone down for the last 2 years, both at 2% a year. So that's,
Can I ask a question? So when you say that, do you mean the sales,
yes, the real sales.
retail sales, and food services and accommodation sales,
Correct.
receipts?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So the several billion that we get in total sales. And then permits for both single-family and not new residential permits have gone down, and there's the numbers there. That, we don't have any more recent information for 19, but that's what happened in 2018. So, and then last year, as a reminder, you might remember that I talked about how the yield curve, when it inverts, it's a predictor, pretty good predictor of when a recession may happen 12 to 18 months into the future. And that inversion, I was signaling last year about this time that that may happen. And in fact, I think that was in October. So right there, we were about 30 basis points away from inverting. And it turns out it took until August, but it actually inverted for about 4 days in August. And then the Fed increased rates, and now we're back to 30 basis points above zero. So, things are not really getting any better, just saying. I don't know. Hard to predict when a recession is going to happen. So we're not trying to predict, but there has been a slowdown, and certainly we've seen it in our sales revenue. So, and here's the sales revenue. So I showed you this graph, and this is updated through the latest information. These are sales tax distributions that we received from the state. It excludes Legends money. And it's by month since January of last year to present. And all these dates actually reflect the time in which the transactions occurred. So we don't get this information. This is for a July transaction, but we don't get it until September. So you can see that this is how the percent above or below what the amount was in the same month of the prior year, right? So you can see that it was very strong at the beginning of 2018, and then it took a nosedive in July of 2018, and it's been, hovering on the performing below the previous year's month's performance, and just in the last month here, it's ticked back up. These are the dollar amounts here. So the top line is the current period collection, and then the bottom line is the comparison from the prior year. And I can help you if for example, this $2.657 million, you can see it over here in July of, where am I? Yeah. 256? There you go. Yeah, there. See, there it is. So, just so that's how that works. All right. So, it's not a trend, but it is moving upward this past month. And in a couple of weeks, I'll tell you what happens in August. So, now this is a graph of all the sales tax, city sales tax, which is 1%, except for this, we give 6% of the 1% to Bonner Springs. Oh, no, that's the county in it. No, okay, this is all just the city sales tax. Now, this is the city sales tax recorded in the governmental funds. It doesn't include the EMS portion, because EMS, they get a portion too, but, right, so anyway, 2019, it's almost 25 million, about 24 million total. Over here on the right is the percentage change year over year, and then here's the total in volume, dollar volume. You notice how it really spiked up in 2017, the percentage, it increased about 14%. That's because the Star Bund money started coming in. For these funds, that equates to roughly $10 million, because it includes not only the general fund portion, but also the portion that's dedicated for the sales tax, for dedicated sales tax fund. And then it leveled out. It went down because, for a number of reasons, mainly the sales tax performance in the middle of 2018 took a nosedive. Again, I go back to here. Remember, see this, right? And then, and so now we're hoping, or we're projecting that it will recover and flatten out a bit. So we're projecting over the course of the forecast period that it'll increase on an annual basis by 3%. Sales tax, okay? And, but in between 19 and 20, we're thinking it's only gonna go up about 800,000, So this seems, this is very, very conservative, because before we were predicting it was gonna be around this level, around the 5% or 6% level. So that's quite a bit less revenue every year than that we were previously anticipating. Now, here's property tax. So home sales, as you know, have been increasing at a steady pace. So in our forecast, we're projecting that home values will increase by roughly 4%, home and commercial values combined, the assessed value. Now, some of this, and by the way, starting from the beginning, these declines are a result, because this is the revenue graph. So these declines here are a result of the mill rate reductions that took place in 17, 18. Yeah, 16, 17, and 18. So that answers that decline, because we were collecting less money because our mill rate was lower.
Well, but it's really not a decline, is it?
Yeah, well, it was, yeah, you're right. You're right. Well, before it was growing at a 3% rate, and then it grew to 2, and then a 1. So
A reduction of an increase.
reduction in the growth rate. Yes, you're right. Sorry. It's just it was sloping down. So then we let the mill rate flat, and it jumped up by roughly 5.5% in 19, and then we're projecting it to be at the same pace roughly in 20. Some of the increases here in 21 and 22 are not entirely due to changes in what we think is going to happen with assessed value. It's also because we know that there are several tax abatement agreements that are expiring, and so we have built that into the forecast. As they gradually expire, we add them to our regular sales tax base. And then secondly,
Sorry, that looks pretty significant. So what is rolling off tax abatement that is significant?
well, I have that on, I don't have that on a slide, but it is provided in this, the chapter on revenues.
I think part of it is General Motors, I believe. Is that correct?
What page is that?
Yeah. And then but actually the bigger portion is that several of our TIFs are getting paid off in 2000. And so in 2001, we will receive roughly half of the property tax from those TIFs into the city general fund, and then the other half goes to the other entities.
So every year I ask for that information to see what's coming off of tax abatement or TIF and what's going into the general fund, and I never get that list. I have never gotten that list.
Well, okay, so actually, I can tell you that TIF, nothing's come off, and this coming year will be the first in a very long time. And
But
then,
tax abatements, things like that,
but that one we can get you. We're happy to get you that.
and it'd be nice
We
to
do
know.
provide that report to the Finance Standing Committee, the TIF report. We've done that.
Yeah, actually, we did one recently. Yeah, we did a report on it this year.
I just asked that someone give it to me, please.
Okay, we'll
For
probably
many
go back
times
to
I've
that.
asked for that. Could I just
Report.
please get that?
Gave you your-
And I'd just like to know, like, what entities, and what also would be nice is where we're at with projections on abatements and TIFs. I mean,
Yeah.
are some, well, not so much abatements, but TIFs, are they paying off early, and how early? Again, I've asked for that for a long time, and it doesn't need to be complicated. It can be as simple as this store was going to be paid off in 2025, but now it's going to be paid off in 2020, or it was supposed to be paid off in 2025, but
yeah.
it's not going to happen. It looks like it's going to be an issue there. I
So
just,
we did, sorry to interrupt, I wanted to tell you that, okay, first off, that's on page 64 of this report,
that's what I asked.
but it's very summary. We can resend you the presentation on
You
the,
don't have a page 64. This goes to page 30.
no, 64 of the actual document that was in the agenda packet,
Okay, I don't have,
the actual report,
okay.
yeah. But I can resend it to you. The other thing I was going to tell you was we did a presentation, I believe it was in June or July of this year, about the tax abatements. And then over a year and a half ago, we did a report on the TIF, it's called the TIF update.
Yeah, and
We
that's
plan to do another one in
right,
the
but
coming
that's
months.
when I asked for it. I remember that, and I was
Yeah.
present for that. But I wanted more detail on the specific projects. What projects were performing well, what
Yeah.
projects were not. I wanted to see that level of detail.
Okay. So, all right,
I'm sorry, Commissioner Bynum?
This slide, can you just start at the beginning of this slide again and back up and tell me everything you've already said over again? I'm
okay,
struggling to understand,
all right.
and
So-
and my struggle began when you made a comment about the mill levy decrease.
All right,
Because we didn't decrease in the budget we passed just a few months ago in 19 for 20.
right.
We did decrease 2 mills in 18 for budget year 19, and I just need you to start over.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, you got me there. That's true. So, all right, because I got my years maybe a little messed up.
And,
So here's all the property tax that the city collects.
okay,
It all goes into governmental funds, all right? So in 16, we collected a little over $80 million. And then we collected just a tad bit more in 17. Now, do you notice how this is, the red line is showing the percentage change from one year to the next, all right? And so that's reflected in this, kind of grid over here, right? So you notice this increase, it's increasing at a much lower pace than it had previously, and that's because the mill rate changed. So my point is, even though we did collect a little bit more in 17, we didn't collect much more than because the mill rate was dropped. But this is all the sales tax. So, I'm sorry, real estate tax. So the city mill, the county mill, all the special levy mills, all of it. And then the same mill reduction occurred in 18, so you see it's pretty flat there. We did another mill rate reduction of 2 mills in 19, but the property, or the values on homes increased substantially. As a result, we did collect roughly, I'm gonna guess, I don't have the number in front of me, but probably about 5 or 6 million across all the funds in 19. And then that same thing is happening in 20. Now, some of this increase from 2021 is because of two reasons. Not only the growth we expect to see in assessed value, but also there's an expected payoff of a couple of TIFs. And then secondly, we expect a couple of tax agreements to expire.
Commissioner McKiernan, and then
Just,
Commissioner.
and I apologize if you covered this earlier. What's your assumption for your projections? You're projecting assessed value to grow at some percentage?
I'm projecting that in 2021, that home or assessed value increase in the low 6% range, and thereafter 4%.
Okay. And are you assuming a static mill rate stays where it is today?
I am assuming a static mill rate, yes.
So those increases are only based on increases of assessed value?
That plus any kind of additional revenue generated because the tax abatement agreements expired.
Right.
Or the TIFs were paid off.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner.
So going back to the confusing part of it, so this is not really the change of the amount of money we're getting. It's the change between what we have gotten and the percentage we're getting now. So it's a percentage change of what we think it should be. Is that what this is? Just showing change? Because Harold and I are sitting here going, wait a minute now. So Harold understands it, but I'm like going,
Well, I think, because I asked this question earlier, the blue bars are the total revenues.
yeah, I understand that.
And the red is the percent annual change. So over here on the far left, the 2016A, that's
Yeah.
about 3.5%. Over the next year, it declined to about 1.5% a growth in tax revenues. The
Yeah.
next year, it was just down to 1% additional revenues over the prior year. And then it bumps up to projected 5.5%.
So this is in relationship to the previous year.
Yes.
I believe
that's
so,
right.
yes.
Percentage over the prior year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I said it's a difference in the change of the interest rate from year to year. The red line represents that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It also, by the way, assumes that we're going to be paying off the casino refund over a 4-year period, which ends in 2022. It also assumes that our delinquency rate is 5.7%, which is, a pretty good estimate. Okay?
Thank you. Kathleen, maybe it would be of benefit if it was explained in a manner that those monies that are coming in from the TIF and the property tax abatements, that percentage is in addition to what we see here. And so then the additional growth from property values is a static line for us.
That is true, yeah.
And so it may be a little easier to understand, to see that percentage.
So I did want to, so just to draw on that point, those expirations of the tax abatement and the TIFs have no impact, are not additional revenue
Right.
that taxpayers are paying. It's just a shifting from where it's accounted for in one place and now it's accounted for over here. So is that what you're?
Yeah, I think where some of the confusion might be coming in is that we see the growth in appraised value, and we see the growth of projected revenue coming in from that growth, provided we're staying static with the mill. That the new dollars that are coming in, that are coming from the abatement and the projected, what's the other one? And TIF, when those dollars come in, what percentage of that increase is that amount of money. If it's 0.1%, it tells us it's $10 million, or it could be.
Well, I could put, make a note to myself and be happy to get you that. I don't remember offhand how much that is, but I know exactly how much it is.
So I think as we get further down, again, some of the presentation, what we're trying to do is just kind of show the aggregate movement here.
Yeah.
The general situation. So what we see here in the blue clearly is the total revenues coming in from real estate ad valorem, including all those which are coming in back from TIF and tax abatement.
Yeah.
I'd like to know how much
All right.
new revenue we got.
Now, so my point, part of my reason for showing you these percentages is to give you some context. These are the two largest tax sources of the UG. So sales tax is roughly projected to come in at 3% growth rate. Property tax, roughly 4% growth rate. And yet, the biggest cost center is personnel, and it's expected to grow by roughly 2.5% or 3%. And so some of our revenues are not keeping pace with our cost demands. That was the point of that. So our personnel costs for all these funds in 20 amounts to roughly $180 million. And that includes salaries and benefits, retiree payments for pensions, for special retirees for when they retire. We have to make those penalty payments, part of that whole silver tsunami discussion, which I also included in this book. I've updated the silver tsunami projections. Remember those? And we're expecting about 400 people to retire the next 5 or 6 years. That's 1/4 of our workforce. So it includes everything, health insurance, everything, the salaries and benefits. It also has a small adjustment for cost of living with a little bit more augmented compensation for our law enforcement personnel.
Kathleen, with that personnel cost, having set all that aside, is there any figure in here that shows that the new employees will come in at most likely a lower rate, pension obligations won't be as much? Has that been calculated into this at all?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. All right, so those are my kind of broader overview points. Now we're going to pass it on to Debbie Johnsher, who's going to talk about the cash forecast for each of these funds. And these are all the baseline forecasts, keep in mind, and it's cash basis.
Good evening. So I'm just going to go over some of the larger funds that we have and just give some of the individual information. All the information that Kathleen just talked about, the sales tax, the property tax, these are all incorporated into the information that we're going to be showing you here. So I'm going to start with the City General Fund, and just wanted to point out that the blue bars are the cash fund balance, and the red dotted line is the percent, the fund balance as a percent of expenditures. And this will be the same format that we use for all of the funds. So as you can see, based on our forecast, we are projecting, we're showing a 10-year span. This is the City General Fund. And as you can see that with all the information that we put into the forecast, that in the future years, starting in 2023, you can see that the fund balance is projected to be negative. I just want to note that this is just a forecast. This is not how we intend to budget. When we get to this point, we will have to make adjustments. We cannot budget a negative fund balance, nor can we end the year with a negative fund balance. So those adjustments would be made as we move along.
So worst would be zero? Is that what you're trying to say? If you have to make those adjustments?
Right.
I know that's right.
or a little above zero.
That's depleting our reserves too. Would that be depleting our reserves?
Yes,
Well,
Inclusive
zero
of
would.
depleting our
yeah,
reserves?
would deplete everything,
So the state budget law doesn't allow you to do that.
right.
Nor would Doug allow.
So just some notes for the city general fund. As Kathleen talked about, we had projected increases in the property tax revenues. We're at about 4 to 5%. As also stated, the city general fund is one that has a heavier reliance on sales tax revenues. It's about 27% for the city general fund. We have projected the recent decline in sales tax revenue, and the future revenues are at a flatter percentage of growth. And then, as we said, we forecasted it to decline to a deficit in 2023. The next fund is the county general fund. Same information. As you will see that the fund balance for this fund is growing out into the forecast period. This fund is more heavily reliant on property tax revenues rather than sales tax revenues. So the projection is that by 2025, this fund balance would grow to, right now, we're sitting at 2018 at about a little over 5 million, and it's projected to be up around 25 million in 2025. And as we said, same assumption for here, the property tax revenues are at about 4 to 5% increase in the forecast. This fund is only about 10% reliant on sales tax. It's mostly reliant on property tax revenue, so the fund balance is not affected, similar to what happened with the city general fund. Same sales tax projections that we did for the city with the increase in fund balance. The next one is the dedicated sales tax fund. This is the fund that's funded with the 3/8 sales tax for public safety and infrastructure. This one is completely reliant or almost completely reliant on sales tax revenue. So with the projections we have in the forecast, you can see that the fund balance, we've adjusted, our 2019, when we budgeted 2019 and 20, we did not budget a negative fund balance, but Kathleen has adjusted the sales tax revenues based on what we're seeing so far, and currently we're looking at potential negative here. So we're monitoring that fund now to determine if we would have to make any adjustment to that fund, since we can't end the year in a negative position.
So,
So the way we're dealing with this is that we're just relying on all of you to make adjustments to make it balance?
So actually, often well, we're monitoring it, first off. Secondly,
Monitoring us sinking?
secondly, there's often salary savings that occurs throughout the year, and this fund does not reflect any salary savings. So the forecast may have a little bit too much expenditures on the salary side in here. And then secondly, oftentimes capital outlay doesn't always get spent to the full budgeted level. So we know that there's certain things that aren't going to be spent.
We still see a very negative trend. I'm curious, what are we doing besides monitoring it
Yeah,
to
so
reverse the negative trend?
I was just gonna, that's why I brought it, I'm just gonna talk about that. So as you can see, the delta, the annual delta is roughly $500,000. So if you look from between 20 and 21, so if we were to shift full-time equivalent FTE, that in this fund equates, there's about 50 FTE in this fund, full-time equivalent employees. So if we were to shift $500,000 in FTEs out of this fund and into the city general fund, I'm thinking about 5 or 6 FTE, then it would balance out the fund for all the years.
But our city fund had the same picture.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, and,
Strategy.
well, that's the issue. This is what we're presenting here is the current fiscal situation and what the projections are for sales tax, property tax revenues, the main revenues coming into the city and the county, what do we see, what are the trends here? They may not play out this way, but what seems to be happening here is we can project a declining amount from the dedicated sales tax in general. You know, the property taxes should grow, but it's because certain funds rely more on property tax and more on sales tax. It affects the different operations in different ways.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is present where we are, what our fiscal situation is, trending into the future. And so it brings back the question, so what do we do? If we don't have the funds to do the things we want to do that we're currently paying for, what kind of changes do we make? And I think that you'll get to that in the last slide, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, it's just painful on the way there.
Yes,
Yes,
it
it
is. That is true.
So,
Could you just rip the Band-Aid off and get to that slide about what, I mean, it's clear
Yeah.
we have an issue.
yeah, well, and that's part of, you know, it's, well, that's a painful side of being transparent, you know? So we're trying to be transparent and inclusive, so we're presenting you all of the issues so that we can all talk about them. Go ahead.
We pretty much covered everything with dedicated, so we'll go on to the street and highway fund.
Yeah.
If we have a dedicated sales tax fund for a specific expenditure, and if we don't have, if we have a reduction in revenue, why would we just automatically assume that we would just shift those FTEs to the general fund?
Well, you know, we don't necessarily automatically assume, but we are working under the assumption that we don't want to reduce our workload or workforce.
No, I think that was really not, I mean, your question is correct. This is the dedicated sales tax that pays for 25 police and 25 fire.
Yeah.
So the option would be, if we don't make up that balance, then to eliminate positions. That would be another opportunity. But then again, what does that do for public safety? Those are the questions that, the policy decisions that face with this fiscal situation, we have to make.
How many police officers are we already down?
20, no, it'd be 25, out of this fund, 25 are paid out of this fund for police officers and 25 firefighters.
And we're already, but my point is, we're already, the whole conversation has been around how many police officers were already down. And now the deal is, are we going to eliminate 50 positions?
No, the question is, the way it's presented here is, those 25 positions from the fire and 25 positions from police, plus infrastructure, are through the dedicated sales tax for public safety and infrastructure. If we don't generate the funds we were generating to pay for those 50 positions plus, we then are faced with the decision, how do we come up with the funds? And that will be, well, you can raise taxes, you can cut expenditures in other places, you can cut positions. So then it raises the question, at what price public safety? And so those are policy discussions that I think not for Kathleen to decide, that's going to be for us to decide.
Yep, my question, Mayor, though, was, these are current projections based on what we're doing, and knowing the number of police officers that were already way down, and we've had multiple meetings about how down we are in law enforcement officers. If we're already so many officers down, and none of these slides are looking good, what you're saying, one option is to eliminate those positions, which means how many positions can we actually eliminate when and if we're saying this is an issue, yet we're desperately out there trying to hire more police officers? I'm a little bit confused by
Now,
that.
I mean, we're not at the place where we're making those policy decisions. This is just the fiscal situation, which is presenting to us the options that are going to be in front of us, the questions we're going to have to decide as we come to budget, because this is not going away. We would hope that sales tax revenue continues to improve and property tax revenues continue to improve. And if that's the case, then we're all good. But, we're not all good, but we're better. But we're not proposing, certainly Kathleen is not proposing that we eliminate those positions. I'm certainly not proposing that.
I'm not saying that, Mayor.
Right.
I think maybe I'm not being very clear. I'm saying we have been down and declining in the number of, I'm going to just use specifically police officers, routinely, rapidly. And if this projection takes that into an account, if we were to fill those positions, what I would tell you is this slide would look worse.
No, no, I can explain what you're asking.
That's-
Yeah, no, I really can, yeah. So, Commissioner, in our projection for personnel in fiscal 19 and in 20, we have included a kind of a natural turnover rate. So that's the turnover rate of when positions become open, and then it takes a while to fill them. And so there's a time period where salaries and benefits are paid, right?
So you're
We use
assuming that job is filled.
So the budget includes 100% funding as if it's filled all the time.
Yes.
Minus a natural turnover. And so that's what we have in place. We haven't included the extraordinary vacancy that's a result of our difficulty in filling a number of the police positions.
So where is all that money that we are saving by having a large loss in police?
It has not been reflected in the expenditures here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah.
Well, it is in the sense that we have overtime.
As if they were.
Well, that is true,
We're
yeah.
expending at a very high rate of overtime now in police department, so that's where the offset is. So it really, you're not seeing a lot of savings that's coming from that, because the difference is, it's not necessarily the reduction. If you said, let's go down 25 positions today, I wouldn't be reducing any bodies. What I would be asking is, what service level are we cutting within law enforcement in order to match that? Because I don't have to do any people to do that, but the police department, even though they're down 60 positions, is functioning at the level to fill all that by,
Overtime.
yes, working there
So
more
we're
than we
paying
would like
more
to.
because of the shortage, which could actually make this look worse.
Yeah,
If it
that's right.
continues like that.
Yeah, so this, as Kathleen said, your numbers here reflect us filling all our positions back up, and, it's the offset. The overtime goes down, but we have some vacancies all the time, and that's all factored in.
And how long has our, just on this particular issue, how long have we been looking at this decline and these vacancies and this increased overtime in police? For a couple years?
Yeah, I think one thing I noted to you this year, coming in, that we were building a budget on the city general fund that was at a negative $1.4 million. That this is something that we do not have a strategy to offset at this point. It was something we were going to work through as we did this forecasting, as we do our PBB work, that we are not in a sustainable position. And this just further demonstrates that this is not sustainable for us on the city side, the way it's structured right now, and we will need to make changes.
And I guess I would like to, Commissioner Kane has a question. This presentation is to give us the fundamentals of where we are in our financial situation, what we're projected. The policy decisions will have to be made later.
Assuming we
Commissioner.
take no action or no changes, yeah.
Commissioner Kane?
I see absolutely no value in what we've seen so far. It's like you're presenting gloom and doom. And I don't know why we're showing this stuff. If you're trying to say we're in trouble in the next budget, I think we all understand that. But this is just a waste of my time.
I guess I would disagree. I think this is really important to
Maybe
us.
my time's more valuable than yours. I see absolutely nothing coming out of this. And I don't know why we did it this way. We've never done it this way before. And I think it's absolutely pitiful.
Yeah, I would disagree.
Mayor, I think the information is valuable. I just think I am on sort of Mike Kane's side. It just comes across as almost, for those of us that have not voted for a property tax increase, as almost a scare tactic that if we don't do this, it's massive gloom and doom if we don't increase taxes. And we all know there are other ways to grow your county.
Well, and that's the policy decisions that have to be made. What this is meant to do is to show us where we are financially. If we take this as gloom and doom, that's on us, in my opinion. We have to see, this is where it is, now how do we move forward? So let's go ahead, because we have to get into an executive session.
I
Continue.
just wanted to point out that as part of the priority-based budgeting, we're going to be evaluating all of our programs and services. And through the scoring process that we're going to present to you on November 7th, it'll provide kind of a look at the programs that are of lowest priority and how much those all cost. And that's a way of reducing our expenditures. The other thing is there's a couple of other slides where there is some positive news. But at the very end of this presentation, we're going to be doing some scenarios where it demonstrates additional resources.
Let's keep moving on it, please.
Yeah.
Waiting for that.
So I'll just quick view of the street and highway fund. Pretty much same thing. This is motor fuel tax collections. We got a 2% increase. Same position as some of the other funds. We're projecting the negative fund balance, and we'll have to review that shift of whether there's a reduction of capital or a shift of FTE. These are all the county special levy funds. As you can see on these, the fund balance is growing. These are all receiving property tax revenues. So that's the aging, developmental disabilities, elections, health, and mental health. We have the fund balances growing out to about $2.15 million by 2025. Tourism fund, this is one that where the fund balance is growing. We have projections for that. We have average growth. The average growth rate over the 5-year period is about 10%. And you can see that from where we are currently in 2020, we're projecting the fund balance to grow to about $5.8 million by 2025. And that's due to additional hotel development. So just the last two slides are the city and county bond and interest fund. This is the city bond and interest fund. I will note that the TIF revenue is excluded here. This is strictly the general obligation bonds. We are projecting, as we've done in the past, $15 million of additional projects each year, which would then be converted to a 20-year bond.
And by the way, actually, the entire amount that's was approved in the CMIP for the next 4 years or 5 years is included for debt financing. So that's true for the $15 million per year starts in year 2025, just so you know.
And so we've shown this graph here showing the sources and uses for the fund, and we're projecting that there may be an opportunity to shift a mill from this fund in 2027. This is the county bond and interest fund. Currently, we have everything built in that's in, as she said, within the CMIP. The fund balance, let's see, is not expected to grow during the near term. We expect that we can, everything that we have currently in the 5-year CMIP can be, this fund can afford to support that debt.
Okay, so one thing I did want to point out from the previous slide is that during the scenarios, we'll be able to do an analysis of how much, if we were to change or come off of that 15 million per year to some other number, we can show you the impact of that on the debt service fund. Just so you. Okay. Thank you. So now we're gonna switch. Hold on. We're gonna switch to the MuniCast. But before I do, I just have one more slide I wanted to share. So we have so you've all been given a sheet and that looks like that in hard copy, and I emailed it to you, Mr. McKiernan. And we but on the Parks Master Plan, one of the initiatives on that sheet is the Parks Master Plan. And as a reminder, it was presented back in 2017. The Parks Master Plan actually has annual operating cost increases of 36 FTE, addition to the current FTE level in our Parks and Recreation Department, and an additional $2.4 million in operating expenses and equipment. So basically $5 million more per year for the Parks and Recreation budget, which right now is around $6 million. And then in addition, it's identified $30 million in additional Parks and Recreation capital projects They've been categorized in these three categories. First is taking care of what we have, which is 12 million, enhancing our existing facilities at 7 million, and then building for the future at 10 million. The funding options for paying for this are potentially a Parks and Recreation dedicated sales tax, a property tax mill rate, which would also be dedicated, or additional programming fees or charges, so. All right, so now we're going to switch over to the MuniCast.
Just do one, please. Do one scenario.
So this is the baseline. If the revenues were to improve or come in 1% higher than is projected in the baseline, then this is how the general fund balances would look. All right? I have this set on the general fund at the moment. If we were to implement the Parks Master Plan without a revenue source, let me see. Yeah, Parks Master Plan without any new revenue source, this would be the impact to the general fund. Okay. If we were to implement a 1% BPU pilot reduction, this would be the impact to the fund. So that's assuming that our revenues are 1% higher than the baseline, and we reduced the BPU by, it would look like that. If we were to bring the revenues back to the baseline, then one BPU pilot reduction would look like that. If we were to incorporate, having our baseline, we incorporated our pension and if we were going to fully fund our pension and fully fund our retiree health liability across all the funds, not just the general fund, then it would look like this. So,
So I think that's going to be sufficient for now. I think,
we have a number of other scenarios here: street preservation,
sure.
facility maintenance. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. It's been very helpful. Again, this is just to present where we are and if, based upon the policy decisions we make, where it will take us. So I would entertain a motion to recess and or go into executive session.
First of all, Kathleen, very good job. It's a difficult presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
You and your staff, Debbie.
I move that the commission go into executive session until 6:55 PM to consult with our attorneys and to discuss confidential matters regarding the status and future direction of labor negotiations as permitted under the Kansas Open Meetings Act, and that staff designated by the county administrator be present to participate in the discussion, and that we reconvene in open session at 7 PM in the commission chamber on the first floor.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.